Now, you mentioned off camera a fascinating one, and that's you're going through and doing a metal detox, and every one of us from our generation has metal in our system somehow, some way. And you were talking about your own instance of lead.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us that story. I mean, that's a wonderful story because it's one way of looking at the whole behind the scenes aspect of a particular problem. Problems in our body could be physical, yes, but it could be from emotional. Any number of it could be the mental plane, emotional plane, physical plane. Any aspect of our energetic body could have a problem. And as we know, allopathic medicine only addresses the body as a mechanical mechanism and purely physical. But as you found for yourself, there's a huge emotional component that if you can bring that into a healed state, you can have some amazing results. And just walk us through your investigation of the lead in your body and how you found it to be individualistic, if you don't mind sharing that
Well,
story
of
with us.
course, that's fine. I do think, to set that up, the idea of being sick, the idea of having a physical symptom is, why is it that chemotherapy works for one patient with a specific diagnosed cancer, but not for the other? And I would put forward that it's because each one of us, we're a collection of experience. I'm the sum total today of all of my experience
In all of your lifetime.
and all of my lifetimes, and in every way possible. Tomorrow, I'm going to be a different person. I'm going to be, actually, it's like baking a cake. We keep adding more and more ingredients. So when we have a physical symptom or a physical manifestation that we're, toxin like lead. So I have lead. I've been tested for lead. I've been doing some chelation things. And the first question, of course, that anybody would ask, which to me is a little bit odd, is to say, where did it come from? Well,
In a physical nature.
in a physical nature, but where did it come from isn't necessarily the first question to ask, because when you say, well, where did it come from? That doesn't help me today as far as, oh, I have to go have chemo or I have to go have radiation or whatever it is. It would matter if I'm still being exposed to lead right now, on a daily basis. But the question was, where did it come from? And this is where I feel like clients of ours have sometimes difficulty consciously trusting their inner voice, that whatever pops in your mind first, just follow that lead in a little reflective way to say, well, what if this were true? So where did that lead come from, Dave, was asked of me. And the thing that popped in my mind immediately was an image as a child on the weekends working on cars in the garage. And I grew up in a family down the Space Coast, rocket engineer, and we worked on cars and air conditioning. We worked on all kinds of things in the garage every weekend, whether I wanted to or not, fixing things. And I distinctly remember, and it was very often, we always had a open can of gasoline, like it was an old cookie jar, aluminum. And whatever you did, and you'd be greasy by the end of the day, the best way to get grease off was to clean your hands in gasoline. It dissolves the grease.
Yeah, it's mineral spirits.
Yeah, so every day or every weekend we did that. And the odd thing about that, when I started to turn this over in my head, because again, I like to pay attention to the signs that we might receive from the universe and that little voice. And so I said, well, what if this is true? I don't just dismiss it outright or accept it outright. I want to play with it. I want to reflect on it. And well, what if it's true? Well, what was going on at that time? Well, what was going on in the garage on a Saturday was there I was fixing the brakes or helping my dad fix the brakes, but I really wanted to go be playing baseball or I wanted to go fishing and I did not want to be there. And so there's a underlying subconscious level of resentment for an 8-year-old that says, why do I have to do this? And thinking about it in those terms, there's an emotional wounding that goes on. And the idea of resentment, and is that linked to lead? Then I have to think about, well, what does lead really represent? Because when you look at lead as a physical toxin, It poisons our body. We know that. It's not good for us. It messes with our brain. But what are those physical characteristics? And to say if lead was a character in a novel, what personality traits, what emotional traits would be considered appropriate to put to lead? Well, in the physical sense, lead is about it's very heavy, very dense, and it is used primarily as an anchor in the sense of it slows things down when you use it in industrial sense. It brings more density and mass to the equation, and we use it in many things that we attribute to being very heavy and difficult to move. Car batteries are full of lead, and they're heavy. And when we think about it, it's like, oh, it's too much to carry.
Well, and you mentioned they build anchors out of them.
They build
and
anchors
all of that,
and
lead sinkers for
and
fishing.
things. So emotionally, is there lead in my system today that is based upon this underlying, you'd said ball and chain, where I'm being pulled or I'm being inhibited from moving forward in my life because I have this underlying resentment. And I do have an underlying resentment after exploring this for the past couple of weeks. Like, yeah, I really wish I could have gone and played baseball. And with that in mind, the question then becomes, if I remove the physical lead through chelation, am I also going to remove the emotional resentment through chelation? How can I improve my chances, my odds of more completely eliminating the toxin known as lead, both physically and emotionally? And then we can talk about another dimension. So in this case, for me, it's a good example of how we learn to heal ourselves, because we have to heal ourselves. And so in my case, from my some experience, I always have to look at different angles, and then I have to be, kind of detail oriented. And I start saying, okay, so I'm going to take care of the physical through the physical chelation, and then I'm going to do the mental or the emotional. What am I going to do there? Well, the best thing to do, obviously, is while I'm being chelated, while I'm sitting there with a needle in my arm, to reflect upon, to try to bring myself into a focal point of imagining my childhood and putting my hands in that gasoline and trying to consciously work through the emotions that I perceive to be there. And then the other thing I can do, which is more in the physical sense, in the intentional senses, I can take one of our supplements that Hannah created, Heart Care Blend. Heart Care Blend is a herbal combination capsule form that is specifically designed to treat emotional heart wounding. It's really good for childhood issues. And so I can take a bottle of those capsules, and I'm going to start taking those before and then after I get chelated. And again, I'm going to be thinking of this Heart Care Blend is about treating my emotional things that are holding me back, that are heavy on me, even though I may or may not be consciously aware. Take it another step forward. Since I've developed in the past couple of weeks this strong connection with this image of being in the garage of my hands in leaded gasoline on a weekly basis, that now I'm going to write on my bottle of Heart Care Blend capsules, I'm going to write a vibropathic.
Could you explain to our group, they might not understand the term vibropathic?
It's a term that Hannah coined, I suppose would be the word. Instead of saying homeopathics, and homeopathics, there's the classical ones.
Where you're taking a particular substance, diluting it down, and so you only have just the energetic within the solution,
right? But
you don't have any of the physical,
right?
So
a vibropathic is very similar in the construction of it, that it has distilled water in it, and that it is concussed like a homeopathic, but it's done on more of a vibrational field with visible patterns underneath it that is put onto a electromagnetic plate. Is that what we call that?
Yeah.
But the vibropathic essentially is the same thing. So if a homeopathic says you take a very tiny bit of a toxin to treat something, Well, a vibropathic, it's a very tiny bit of, in my case, garage vibropathic that I just made up. Because of my concentrated intention on what does that mean to me and my own unique perspective, my sum total of my experience within garages has a very unique frequency signature. Within that memory, within that mass of information in my brain, there's a sliver, if you will, of a emotional toxin that is still within my emotional body. So I'm creating a emotional homeopathic based upon this concept, this idea of it was in the garage. It's kind of like, I think of like Clue, the board game.
Board game Clue.
In the library with Colonel Mustard and the knife thing.
Just the knife.
It's kind of that thing.
The pistol, the knife, the rope, whatever.
Right. So the vibropathic I create when I write it, garage, and when I write behind that vibropathic, parentheses, V, parentheses, that Geese and I both work with vibropathic so much that we have a very intense, focused frequency on what that means. For the neophyte, they have to work with this, just like when you work with anything over and over, it becomes more strong and more, the signal
focused
becomes more crystallized.
Yes.
And it becomes more powerful. It's organically amping itself up. So on my heart care blend, my emotional wounding, I'm going to write on there garage vibropathic. I go and get my chelation done, and then I go for my walk. And on my walk, while that's pumping through my blood, that chelation, the chelators is what they would be. I will also have the herbal remedy for my emotional body and me that I've actually stamped with my own fingerprint by saying it's about the garage is where I got the lead. And you and I were discussing earlier this morning was how was it in that moment in the garage where I was negative, I was emotionally negative at the time, my field was negative. Was that the opening for that lead to actually affect me?
Because as you said, what about the guy that's been the garage mechanic and loved working on cars and
has no
he
lead.
would have had no effect with the lead.
Right. And certainly, we say...
And he could have had the lead in his system, but it wasn't a toxicity energetic. And we've seen people that drank till they're 90 and smoked, but were they able to survive because there wasn't a toxicity around that particular practice or whatever?
Well, you bring as an individual, you bring a big stack of variables of experience to you and baggage, sure. And doing that, you are unique, and so the healing is also unique. The allopathic doctors, it's about sledgehammer medicine, where, boy, if you've got X, then this is what we're going to hit you with. And it doesn't work that way.